Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a frontier. Hope the week's gone well. Let me start with some macro thoughts. Ethereum briefly crashed from $319 to 10 cents in seconds on one exchange after multi-million-dollar trades at Holga. And we have these, exchanges are replicated all over the place. Quite often the liquidity in them is not that high, and that's why you get these flash crashes happening with increasing frequency. If you remember, even sterling had a flash crash. Asia's best performing markets, this is from David Inglis. India up 17.3%, that's the Narendra Modi effect. Korea, and notwithstanding how hot it's been on that peninsula, up 17.1%, Hong Kong up 16%, Vietnam 14.1%, and the Philippines 13.9%. Pretty much in line with some of the returns we've seen in Africa. Home thoughts, I went back to Don DeLillo, you'll see why. The true life is not reducible to words spoken or written, not by anyone ever. The true life takes place when we're alone, thinking, feeling, lost in memory, dreamingly self-aware. The sub-microscopic moments, he says. And then this I always find very powerful, with the last billionth of a second in the evolution of matter. This photograph caught my attention. A moment, a grieving father hears his dead daughter's heartbeat inside the chest of a man who received her life-saving organ. Extraordinary, isn't it? I went back to a bit of Kerouac. This is a photograph of the road in the Samburu, which made me think of Kerouac's "Nothing behind me, everything ahead of me, as is ever so on the road." And then I like this quote, "Sal, we've got to go and never stop going till we get there." Where are we going, man? I don't know, but we've got to go. I must say I feel like that sometimes. And increasingly I've persuaded Hannah that she can feel like that sometimes as well, because she tends to be quite strict with my feelings. The elephants of Samburu is captured by Faith Kanja in our recently concluded Wanderlust trip. That's Faith's photographs, and this is a lovely one that made me want to go up there. An average elephant living in and around the Samburu National Park ranges over 1,500 square kilometers during the year. I was speaking to Mrs. Douglas Hamilton, whose book I read. They were newlywed and they went to Lake Manyara to study the elephants, and they wrote this book about those early days. And I meet them quite often here and there, and she was on my flight up for a wedding at Lewa, and then on my way back from Samburu, we caught a connection at Lewa, and we sat next to each other. She had so much to say, it was quite fascinating, but she was saying one thing, that they study anxiety levels. They have all these collars on the elephants, save the elephants, and saying that when they're outside the boundaries of the park, and bear in mind there's no actual boundary, stress levels are so high, they feel so unsafe. When they come back in, the stress level comes right down. And then the other thing she said was, I asked her about super tuskers. These are the elephants with enormous tusks, many of which would be poached. And of course, you're poaching out the gene pool when you're doing that. But she was saying there was one sort of 30-year-old elephant, which obviously was growing into be one of these super tuskers. And one day they noticed that it was moving, and it moved. The interesting thing, she said, it stood absolutely still in the day because they realized the day presented a lot of danger, and moved entirely at night, and got as far as Somalia before turning around and coming back. Quite a fascinating story amongst many she was telling me about, but just to talk about the elephants. This is a photograph I took that weekend. They let you come so close and you're in an open car. It's quite incredible. The gentlest of creatures. Have a look at this short video clip. Samburu National Reserve is situated at the southeastern corner of Samburu district in the Rift Valley province of Kenya, bordered to the south by the Iwase-Nyiro River, which is largely dry, separates it from the Buffalo Springs National Reserve. The reserve covers an area of 165 square kilometers. Really is worth a visit. The reserve is rich in wildlife with fame for abundance in rare northern specialist species such as the Grevy's zebra, very big ears, Somali ostrich, tall, pink and black, reticulated giraffe, extraordinary pattern, Geronook, those very tall necks, and the Beza oryx, also referred as the Samburu special. And saying that reserve has a minimum of 900 elephants. Large predators such as the lion. The lion we saw was one lioness, which is a local one, and 3 brothers who had come up from lower and were really very grand. Leopard, we saw them, but at a distance. I saw a tail very closely. Cheetah we did not see. Lots of lovely birds, wonderful landscape. And on that, another photograph from Faith, panoramic view, Samburu National Reserve. I went to a talk and dinner last night given by SAP Kenya. Gilbert invited me, and they'd invited the head of innovation of South Africa, a lady called Dr. Adriana Marais, and she spoke about how she's going to Mars. Very interesting presentation about how we look at the world and what's happening and what's changing. I thank them for that dinner. Caroline Matoka was there, Wallace Cantor, amongst many others. Political reflections. Corbyn has overtaken May for the first time as voters' choice for who would be the best Prime Minister. Interesting, isn't it? Really resurgent, parabolic rebound. Certainly I'd written him off at the beginning, but he's just grown in stature, grown in taking share of the conversation and pushing the agenda in his direction. And then I saw this tweet from Moby Dick at sea. But shall this crazed old man be tamely suffered to drag a whole ship's company down to doom with him? Japan and the US failed to shoot down a dummy ballistic missile during a test off Hawaii. Middle East neighbours issue demands to end Qatar blockade. Closure of the Al Jazeera satellite TV news channel. The 13-point list obtained by the Financial Times also insists Qatar limit relations with Iran and shut down a Turkish military base, halting military cooperation with the NATO member that was offered in the wake of the crisis. Shut down Al Jazeera channels and affiliated channels, said point 6 of the document written in Arabic, whose title translates as Joint Requirements for Qatar. These requirements must be met within 10 days from the date of delivery or they will be considered void. I'll put up a photograph of Al Jazeera's new studio in Doha, which I've visited a few times. Once, many years ago, August 2011, and I wrote a piece called Soft Power, Qatar and Al Jazeera, and I think it addresses the point as to why GCC might be particularly keen to close the channel down. What I want to look at, this is something I wrote in 2011, is Al Jazeera and how it is a preeminent example of soft power in this 21st century of ours. Soft power is the ability to obtain what one wants through co-option and attraction. It can be contrasted with hard power, that is the use of coercion and payment. Soft power can be wielded not just by states, but by all actors in international politics, such as NGOs or international institutions. The idea of attraction as a form of power dates back to ancient Chinese philosophers such as Lao Tzu in the 7th century BC, who said, "Water is fluid, soft and yielding, but water will wear away rock which is rigid and cannot yield. As a rule, whatever is fluid, soft and yielding will overcome whatever is rigid and hard. This is another paradox. What is soft is strong." I love that. Lao Tzu, the idea was further developed by Joseph Nye of Harvard University in his 2004 book, Soft Power. the means to success in world politics. And I happen to believe that the Emir of Qatar is now Lao Tzu's very best student, and he's having to be right now. There are about 250,000 Qataris in a world of about 7 billion souls. That's considerably less than 0.1%. They tell me Al Jazeera is beamed into more than 200 million households. Certainly in 2011, the numbers had spiked even further. The point I'm making is this: you can have all the hard power you want, but we live in an information and communication century now. And in the context of that new landscape, Al Jazeera has delivered a spectacular return, any way I care to measure it for the Emir. That's why they want to close it down. It's a photograph from 2011 when I wrote that piece, and Nick Clark at Al Jazeera was speaking to me. June this year, I wrote this piece, Rolling Over Qatar, and I quoted Robert Fisk, who recalled when he asked the Emir's father, Sheikh Hamad, later uncharitably deposed by Tamim, why he didn't kick the Americans out of Qatar, he replied, because if I did, my brothers would invade me. Returning to the Riyadh summit, where the kingdom committed 1/5 of its remaining forex reserves, which will fall off a cliff when oil slumps towards $32 a barrel, for a purchase of beautiful American arms, I said that spoke to a heist. The House of Saud's protector has always been the US, but this time an American president has excelled himself at extracting a mind-bogglingly egregious price. I have to surmise that the Emir of Qatar balked at the price. That his adversaries are saying, okay, we can always do it by force. But rather cleverly, if you notice, now he's looking at a 10% stake in the airline, bought $12 billion. He's probably done what needed to be done by now, I would have thought. And that's why the State Department responded as it did. And then in May 2016, I wrote about how Qatar was punching beyond its size. And then, according to an article I read in Asia Times, reportedly the Emir Tamim bin Hamad had complained about the Saudi crown prince, saying that Saudi Arabia will crumble if he ever assumes the throne. Can understand then why there's so much personal animosity. In China's far west, the perfect police state is emerging. It was Friday, the Islamic Day of Assembly, but outside Kashgar's Inca Mosque on Liberation Avenue, it was the growl of diesel engines that filled the air, not a muezzin's wistful cry. One by one, armoured personnel carriers, some with machine guns poking from their turrets, rolled towards People's Square, where a 12-metre statue of Mao Zedong was preparing to preside over the latest in a series of tub-thumping anti-terror rallies to be held here in the heartlands of China's Muslim Uyghur minority this year. Open-back lorries packed with heavily armed troops joined the procession. Red and yellow propaganda banners draped their sides. Unity and stability are blessings. Separatism and unrest are a curse. Read one. Let all those terrorists who dare to be enemies of the people be smashed to pieces. And then talking about this gentleman who's been sent to Xinjiang, saying, I'm sure he's been sent there to pacify Xinjiang. It is almost like in the old East Germany, the perfect police state. Meanwhile, warns, the current policy by Beijing could inflame rather than extinguish anti-government anger. Saying Xinjiang is a powder keg, much more so than Tibet. The combination of securitization and crackdown on normal religious practice is an absolute recipe for disaster. This is absolutely a ticking time bomb. And in December 2013, in the context of the pivot to Asia, I did say that the periphery, China's periphery, and Xinjiang are a tinderbox. How an entire nation became Russia's test lab for cyber war. Very interesting article in Wired about the Ukraine. The clocks read 0 when the lights went out. It was a Saturday night last December, and Yanisky was sitting on the couch with his wife and teenage son in the living room of their Kiev apartment. The 40-year-old Ukrainian cybersecurity researcher and his family were an hour into Oliver Stone's film Snowden when their building abruptly lost power. The hackers don't want us to finish the movie, Eniski's wife joked. She was referring to an event that occurred a year earlier, a cyber attack that had cut electricity to nearly 250,000 Ukrainians 2 days before Christmas in 2015. Yaniski, a chief forensic analyst at a Kiev digital security firm, didn't laugh. He looked over at a portable clock on his desk. The time was 0000, precisely midnight. That's when another paranoid thought began to work its way through his mind. For the past 14 months, Yaniski has found himself at the center of an enveloping crisis. A growing roster of Ukrainian companies and government agencies had come to him to analyze a plague of cyber attacks that were hitting them in rapid, remorseless succession. A single group of hackers seemed to be behind all of it. Now he couldn't suppress the sense that those same phantoms, whose fingerprints he had traced for more than a year, had reached back and through the internet's ether into his home. Many global security analysts have a much larger theory about the endgame of Ukraine's hacking epidemic. They believe Russia is using the country as a cyber war testing ground, a laboratory for perfecting new forms of global online combat. And the digital explosives that Russia has repeatedly set off in Ukraine are ones it has planted at least once before in the civil infrastructure of the United States. My piece, of course, you will remember we have a DV-8 Tomahawk. I was talking about the US election when I said Russia ran a seriously sophisticated program of interference, mostly digital. Don DeLillo is a prophetic 21st century writer, writes as follows in one of his short stories. The specialist is monitoring data on his mission console when a voice breaks in. A voice that carried with it a strange and unspecifiable poignancy. He checks in with his flight dynamics and conceptual paradigm officers at Colorado Command. We have a DV-8 Tomahawk. We copy it as a voice. We have gross oscillation here. There's some interference. I've gone redundant, but I'm not sure it's helping. We are clearing an out frame to locate source. Thank you, Colorado. It's probably just selective noise. You are negative red on the step function quad. It was a voice, I told them. We had just received an affirm on selective noise. We will correct Tomahawk. In the meantime, advise you to stay redundant. The voice, in contrast to Colorado's metallic pigeon, is a melange of repartee and song with a quality of purest and sweetest sadness. Somehow we were picking up signals from radio programs of 40, 50, 60 years ago. Let's move on to the markets. Currency markets. Euro, dollar having a little pop higher, 111.85. Dollar index, 97.40. Japanese yen, 111.24. Swiss franc, 0.9705. Pound, rather strong, 127.36. The Australian dollar, 0.7576. India rupee, 64.545. South Korean, 111.38. 86, the Real 334.14, that's a little bit soft. Egyptian pound 18.1355, and the rand back below 13 at 12.95. Euro dollar, let me put up a 3-month chart. I think it is eventually headed to 114.50. Crude oil, last trading at $42.85. Oil prices have fallen about 20% this year, despite an effort by OPEC to cut production by 1.8 million barrels per day that has been in place since January. This is the worst first-half performance for crude oil since 1997, when rising output in the Asian financial crisis led to sharp falls. I have a price target of $32 a barrel for WTI. I think it's a Wizard of Oz moment. There is no one behind the curtain. And I'd said it in May, the market is primed to crash. Wednesday is fast becoming oil's least favorite day of the week. Have a look at this data over the space of a few days. And then on the 8th of May, I said reserves have been depleted from Abuja to Riyadh, from Rwanda to Caracas, and in all the oil-producing capitals of the world. Gold price $12.53, I think, was fundamentally bullish. Prices are up 9% this year. Cocoa, coffee, sugar, all have been going lower. Cocoa has fallen almost 10% since the start of this week, and it's sort of homing back in on a 10-year low, which was set in April. This is a photograph of the US Embassy in New Delhi. I thought it was rather fantastic, designed by Edward Durrell Stone. Let's move on to Africa. Key existing and planned maritime entry points into Africa's hinterland. That's from Afrovisual data. Top FDI destinations in Africa by value of investment in 2016. That's from Afrovisual data again. Most expensive cities for expats, most in the world, is Luanda. The cost of renting a 3-bedroom unfurnished house of international standards in an appropriate neighborhood slid, but it's still the most expensive city for people to live. South African all share up 0.83% this year. That's a 6-month low. Dollar versus rand, 12.94 area, but obviously I don't see a result anytime soon in South Africa. Egypt to extend the state of emergency for 3 months. Nigerian all share has corrected 4.208% over 2 sessions, but it's still up 22.53% this year. People might be catching up with the low oil price now. Ghana Stock Exchange up 14.94% this year. Dangote Cement may shut Ethiopian plant over mining disputes. Dangote Cement said it may shut its operations in Ethiopia if authorities in the central state of Oromia don't reverse an order to cement makers to hand over control of some parts of their businesses to local young people. Oromia State's East Shewa Zone administration wants the Nigerian company to outsource its pumice, sand and clay mines to youth groups or be responsible for any problems that might arise, according to a letter from the authority to Dangote that was seen by Bloomberg and verified with a representative of East Shewa's administration. The regional government sees the transfer of jobs in pumice production as a way to ease youth unemployment and quell unrest, according to the document. If no action is taken against global warming, most of sub-Saharan Africa will have more than 200 days per year above 35 degrees centigrade by 2100. It's New York Times via Mark Anderson. And I was writing about this in June when I went to Samburu. I said in many respects, and a little counterintuitively, the Horn of Africa has become a sort of epicenter of global warming. November 2015, I said I cannot help feeling we are like frogs in boiling water. We have created massive interference in the cosmic tuning phenomenon. And then I like this tweet: when it's too hot for planes to take off, it's time to worry about urban life. And I like this photograph as well. Secondary school girls walk with buckets and jerry cans to fetch water at a borehole located just outside the school gate in Ngulu, northern Uganda. Coming to Kenya, first we take Nairobi in Africa. City elections are where the action is, says The Economist. At a street corner in Kangemi, a neighborhood of tin-roof shacks and new brick tenements in the west of Nairobi, men huddle into what are called street parliaments. Standing several deep, they debate politics, each man speaking in turn with a moderator at the center. We're done with these thieves, says Jeremiah Mkaiti, a 53-year-old caretaker. We need change. Others pipe up with similar complaints. The government is doing nothing. They steal money and their promises come to nothing, says Cyrus Inaljoa, a 36-year-old security guard. Much of the talk is about the general elections, which are scheduled for August. Voters will pick from candidates running for president right down to those standing as municipal councillors. Uhuru Kenyatta, the president, will probably win a second term. No incumbent Kenyan president has ever lost an election. And then talking about devolution, competition is thriving in the cities, saying in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania's commercial capital, the opposition won the mayoralty last year for the first time ever. Kampala, opposition parties dominate the city council. South Africa, the DA won Johannesburg, Port Elizabeth, Pretoria last year. It's governed Cape Town since 2006. So competition for cities and states in Africa can sometimes drive reform, says Nicholas Cheeseman. And saying if city politics can sway the national sort, that bodes well for the future. And then they take an example of Mr. Sonko, who has a controversial past and is standing to be governor of Nairobi. And talking about his approach. He was named in Parliament by Kenya's then Interior Minister as being suspected of dealing drugs. Mr. Sonko could not be reached for comment despite repeated attempts by The Economist. More than that, though, he's a populist. Part of his appeal among the poor is that he showers his own money on local services, such as free ambulances called the Sonko Rescue Team. He's promised to upgrade slums and cut taxes paid by market traders. If Mr. Sonko were to win, it would be a blow to the various opposition parties that had hoped to use their grip over cities such as Nairobi and Mombasa to build up their share of the national vote. Yet it would also reflect a slow change in how Kenyan politics works. For the most part, Kenyans vote along ethnic lines. To win a national election, politicians have to build ethnic coalitions, bringing in enough small groups to win the tribal mathematics. But in cities such as Nairobi, people seem to be moving away from voting along tribal lines. Interesting point. That's really urbanization, the new young demographic, huge demographic being enfranchised this election. And like in the UK, where you saw that big youthquake, one's wondering when this youthquake happens in Africa. President Uhuru accused Raila of trying to sabotage the election. The Chief Justice Maraga says the judiciary will not change the election date. I'm participating in a conference that Moody's is holding, the 4th Annual East Africa Summit. That's on Wednesday, 5th July. Do take a look at that program. Okay, we have most of our overseas runners here now. This is from Lewa Wildlife Safaricom Marathon. I went to that. It was really a tremendous event. Tallow oil year-to-date return minus 44.91%. It's a bit of a proxy for Kenyan oil and gas. Nairobi All Share fresh 23-month high, up 15.76% this year. Safaricom up 21.4% this year, just a whisker off a record. NSE 20 up 13.38%, 11-month, 49-week high. National Bank, which had rallied 62.58% in June, finally met some profit-taking road back, 4.42%. Deacons has taken a 1.3 billion shilling debt at an interest rate of 21%, which is above the bank lending rate, cap rate. Deacons is down 40.49% so far this year. Wishing you a super weekend. Thanks for listening.